Silverstone marks the halfway point of the 2024 season, and I think it also marks the return of F1 racing. So let's discuss yet another crazy weekend. So first and foremost, Oliver Burman was announced to drive for Haas from 2025 and onward with a multi-year contract, so congratulations, Ollie. I love that for you. It's very exciting. I also think Haas is a really good option right now, it seems. They're performing really well. And also it's exciting for me because since I got into F1 only halfway through the 2023 season, this will be the first time I see a new face on the grid. So that's really cool. Silverstone is known for like special liveries and helmets, since it's a very special place in the motorsport world. It's also a home race for a few teams and a few drivers. And I was honestly kind of surprised that we only had like 2 special liveries, and a bit disappointed with McLaren who didn't do one because they always slay with theirs, so whatever. So we have the Red Bull livery, which is kind of like their normal one but with splashes of red. I know they had like a fan vote for it or something like that, and I think all the submissions were fan submissions, so that's cool. But yeah, this is not too special, but it still looks nice. I think in the picture that I chose for this, the background is very saturated, and like maybe that undermines the effect of the livery itself. So I'll give this like a 7 out of 10, I guess. It doesn't look bad. It's just not amazing, you know? So moving on to the Williams livery. At first, I saw a picture of this and I was like, okay, it's not very special. They just like put the Union Jack on it. Not a lot of effort, but then it's actually the names of everyone who works at Williams. So that bumps them up to like 7 or 8. So yeah, those are the special liveries for the weekend. Moving on to the helmets, which we had a bit more of those. So going in alphabetical order, this is Alex's helmet. I like the like muted pastel colors. It's very soothing to the eye, not like screaming at you, and I really like the little illustrations of his pets. I like the art style itself. This is a very chill, cute, and I think he also opened a clothing line and or a restaurant with these like style of art and like a theme of his pets, so that's cool as well. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10 because it's not perfect. It's not a 10 and it's not a 9 either, so yeah, 8.5. Moving on to Checo Perez's helmet. It's cool. The huge Red Bull, and that's true for all the Red Bull drivers, like they have to have that on their helmets, so that's like pretty big, and I think it takes like 20 to 30% of the helmet, so it's kind of limiting in terms of designing a cool helmet, but this is kind of cool. It's like a checkered, checkered. I don't think that's related, but I like it. I actually like it a lot, so just because it's like less artistic, maybe I would give it an 8, a solid 8. So moving on to Fernando Alonso's helmet. I don't like it. I don't like the brown. It's obviously a brand deal helmet and not a artistic self-expression helmet, so a 3 out of 10. I'm sorry. Moving on to Lando. Unlike Alex's helmet, Lando is all screaming vibrant colors, which I don't like as much. I do like his base, like fluorescent yellow, but all of these colors are too clashing in my opinion. He had like 4 or maybe 5 sets of helmets, each with a slightly different design, so when like put together it makes a little animation, so that's cool, and that definitely bumps like up the rating. But other than that, it's very Lando and I appreciate the animation, so yeah, a 6 is good. Moving on to Oscar, obviously not a helmet, but these are his boots, which were fan made. This is super cute. I really like this art style and like this collage design, so even though it's not a helmet, I would give it a 9 out of 10 actually. Shout out to the fan who made this. I'll tag her. I'll like put her username here. Also, I know Lando has like matching shoes to his helmets, but I couldn't really find a picture of those, so I mean it's just the same as the helmet design. Then we had Gasly. I don't love this. I don't like the smears of paint, not my style. I think it's another 3, unfortunately. But moving on to Zhou, who always slays with his design. I mean, he's really good at fashion, so I think it's a given he would be good at designing his helmets. This is so cool. It's like a chromatic, like reflective material or something like that. I like the colors a lot. They are screaming in your face, but not like neon like Lando's are. There's a Z here, or Z, whatever you want to call it. The pattern behind it, like on the blue, is cool. He has like the flowers he usually has on his regular helmet as well. Very cool, very cohesive. It all like goes well together. I like it a lot. And I know this isn't just for Silverstone, it's for the next few races, but either way, he debuted it at Silverstone. So ending on a good note and moving on to FP1, or actually no, one more thing before that, or actually two things, sorry. First, we had a teaser trailer for the F1 movie with Brad Pitt this weekend. I'm actually very excited about it. I don't know why so many people are hating. I'm definitely gonna watch it like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme, pointing out everything and everyone. But yeah, other than that, I'm really excited. I don't know, it looks really cool. I think because seems to be pretty much practical and in world, it's gonna elevate everything in the movie. Obviously produced by Lewis Hamilton, music by Hans Zimmer, as I said last week. So all the components seem to be pointing at a good movie, except for the name. Like, they actually called it F1. I hope they change it. I hope it's not like the final name, because it's such a generic name. Like, if you search up F1, there is no way the movie would come up. So change that. But other than that, it looks pretty promising. And then the second thing is that I also watched F2 this weekend. The sprint was chaotic. It was wet weather, heavy rain, so a lot of safety cars, virtual safety cars, and I think one or two red flags. But it was also Kimi's first win, which is also, I'm pretty sure, the first time a pole seater wins a race in F2 this season. Crazy statistic. And then we had the feature race, which was less chaotic because it was dry, but it was eventful nonetheless. We also had a championship leader change with Isaac Hadjar, who won and overtook Paul Aaron for the lead. So that's very cool and exciting to have such a dynamic championship. So now the moment you all waited for, the F1 weekend, starting with the practice sessions. Well, in FP1 we had a few rookies stepping in. We had Frank Pinto, who drove for Williams instead of Logan, Jack Doohan for Alpine instead of Gasly, and Isaac Hadjar for Red Bull instead of Checo, and also Oliver Berman. Actually, I don't remember who it was instead of, but for Haas. All F2 drivers, except for Jack Doohan, who is a reserve driver for Alpine, who we might see in Ocon's seat next year, who knows. We had some upgrades for Haas, McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes. Maybe more, those are just the ones I picked up from what I heard in practice. And FP1 and 2 were dominated pretty much by McLaren. They were at the top of the timesheets, which I know doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's always nice to see. And Ferrari were really struggling with high-speed corners, which is basically this entire circuit. So FP3 was wet, whereas Mercedes seemed to be the strongest. Similar to Canada with the wet conditions. So moving on to quali, Q1 was tricky. It was mixed conditions with a wet track but no active rain, which means there's a lot of track evolution. I think it was Ruth Buscombe who said that there's 5 to 10 times more track evolution than in normal like dry conditions. And that's because the track is drying with time, and also cars who are going through are pushing the water off the racing line. So it's really a matter of who's last to the line. But that's also tricky because you don't want to send your driver too late and risk missing the flag like happened last week with Leclerc, or getting a yellow or red flag near the end of the session, preventing you from putting in a lap. And there was also chances of rain, which you don't want to come and then ruin the track evolution, so the lap that you put in is not really representative. So all those variables made the session very chaotic and therefore entertaining. The rain did come near the end and made the track like wet for 1 or 2 laps, in which Verstappen actually went onto the gravel and damaged his floor. But we had Pierre qualified P20, which didn't really matter because he was gonna start from the back of the grid no matter where he qualified because of a 50 grid penalty, which I'll explain in a second. Checo was 19th because he went onto the gravel and was beached when the track was semi-wet, so he couldn't put in a dry lap. Then we had Ocon, Magnussen, and Bottas also out in Q1, which are pretty normal for that stage. Q2, not as crazy. Max was struggling a bit, and at one point I actually thought he might get out, but obviously it's Max Verstappen, who am I kidding? And we had Daniel Ricciardo, Zhou, Yuki Tsunoda, Logan Sargent, who qualified P12, which is great, and Charles Leclerc out in Q2. Charles. And then we had Q3 with a 1-2 for Mercedes, which also made a 1-2-3 for the Brits with Lando at P3. And right next to Lando, his best friend / biggest rival, Max Verstappen, who qualified P4, again with a damaged floor. Right behind him was Oscar, who couldn't improve on a second lap, as well as Lando. Actually, no one improved on a second lap except for the Mercedes, so don't know what happened there. But then we had Hülkenberg at P6, Carlos P7, Stroll P8, Alex P9, and Alonso P10. So not too bad, but not too good for McLaren, honestly, which is kind of a theme this weekend. We'll get back to that. So, right, let's explain the Pierre penalty. So each driver has an allocated number of components they're allowed to use in a season. For example, you can use 2 power units. I don't know if that's actually the case. So if a driver wants to use a third power unit, he'll get a 10 grid penalty. Pierre used 2 new components over the limit, so that meant a 20 grid penalty. And since you can't start from more back than 20th, they decided to take 3 more new components, giving him another 30 grid penalty, combining to a 50 place grid penalty. And also one thing I want to touch about, Lando and Max. The beef is officially debunked. Max said in an interview that all he pretty much cared about after the accident they had last week in Austria was his relationship with Lando, and on Monday morning he actually woke up early to talk to him about it, and Lando already texted him. So it is confirmed they are best friends, and apparently wanting that is not delusion at all, so I'm glad. But now to the race. So the race started with dry conditions. It was a pretty clean start. Max gets ahead of Lando, things settle, and then we had rain incoming. It started raining and Max seemed to be struggling, which is kind of weird because Max is usually pretty good in the rain. So that was weird, but he gets passed by both McLarens. The Mercedes have a fight for P1. Hamilton gets ahead of George, who was on pole, by the way. I forgot to say that. It was the Mercedes 1-2, but George was on pole again. So yeah, Hamilton moves past George, but they both go off and Lando goes up to P1, and Oscar also passes them both and goes to P2. At this point, I'm so nervous. They're still on slicks, and I'm so scared that they're gonna make a mistake and fly off into the wall. But none of that happens, thankfully. And with more rain coming in, it was a matter of when you stop for inters. And you have to do that in the perfect timing, because if you go too early, like Checo and Charles did, you're too slow, and by the time the track gets actually wet, your tires are done. They're dead. And if you put them too late, that's what lost Lando the 2021 Sochi Grand Prix, and probably what lost him or Oscar's win today. So Max from P5 pits first from the top 5 and gets the timing perfect, of course. It's Max, it's Red Bull, it's Hannah Schmitz. He gets it perfect. To compensate for that, both Mercedes go into the pits a lap later, and McLaren decides to not double stack them and gets only Lando in the pit with the Mercedes. So they pretty much fucked Oscar's race at that point, because the time he lost during that extra in lap where the track was wet and he was on slicks was like 10 times more than the time he would have lost if they double stacked them. And he was doing really good this race. He had really good pace, arguably better than Lando's, and it's not the first time McLaren prioritized Lando's strategy over Oscar's. And I get it, Lando is the more experienced driver at McLaren. He's more of a number 1 driver there than Oscar is, and he was also first on the road. But I think if they looked at the data, they would know to not do that. So I'm not really sure what happened there. And George, by the way, had to retire the car for a water system issue. I have no idea what that is. But then it's the same thing about switching back to the slicks when the track dries, with the timing of it all. And McLaren once again leave Lando an extra lap while Max and Lewis pit for their slicks. And not only that, when Lando does come in, he has a slow stop of 4.6 seconds and puts on used soft tires, which was definitely a mistake. He had fresh medium tires that they knew were the best decision because Oscar had them on and he was flying, setting fastest laps. And they said, like, on the radio, yes, mediums are the best choice. And like, I know Lando asked for like softs. He said, yeah, softs would be best, or any other slicks. And they also told him on the radio that they should put either mediums to cover off Max, who had hards on, or softs to cover off Lewis, who had softs as well. And at this point, Lewis is in front of Max, so obviously Lando is gonna pick the softs. But McLaren should have known with their data that this is not the correct decision. So by the time Lando comes out of the pits, Lewis is already 2 seconds ahead of him. And Lando's really struggling with degradation on his tires and gets passed by Max as well. And Lewis Hamilton goes to win the Silverstone Grand Prix. Now, I know I'm not saying that with a lot of excitement or emotions, and that's because I'm not really a Lewis fan, and I'm mostly upset with McLaren about this race, but it was definitely a nice moment. Obviously, Lewis was very emotional. It's his first win since 2021. Obviously, a home race for him, his last year with Mercedes, and he also broke the record for most wins at a single circuit. So it's definitely a result I didn't want, but I can live with, and I'm very happy for all the Lewis fans. He definitely deserved it, but McLaren, I need you to fix your strategy. Please. Because you can have arguably the best car and a great pair of drivers, but with shitty strategy calls like you had today, you can compete for the win. So what's all that hard work for? Other than the fight in front, I'm surprised we didn't have a safety car or a virtual safety car. Silverstone is very prone to those, especially with this kind of weather. So great job, everyone. You didn't crash. We had good results for Carlos, who finished P5 and got fastest lap despite the struggles Ferrari are having. Nico Hülkenberg, who finished P6, Aston Martin with both cars in the points, which might be the first time they do that this year. That's probably not true, but it kind of feels like it is. So good for them. And then Alex and Yuki rounding out the top 10, getting important points for their teams. And Logan, who finished right outside the points in P11, his best result of the year, and just a good result for him in general. And now for the not so good results, George Russell was in it for some pretty big points, and unfortunately had to retire again from a technical issue, which is unfortunate. Charles, who I swear to God, he signed a deal with the devil to get that Monaco win, because that curse was removed from Monaco and put onto every other race this season. Hopefully just this season, because if this goes on to next season, I'm gonna be done. He's not only struggling with the car, Ferrari keeps making wrong strategy decisions with him every single time. And they're obviously kind of known for that. The strategy department at Ferrari are clowns, haha, fun jokes, but it's actually very upsetting. Checo Perez actually started from the pit lane. He just had a really bad weekend. I feel like he got worse since he re-signed with Red Bull. And his performance is opening up the talk for a lot of rumors and conspiracies, which I really don't want to get into because, like, until anything's confirmed, I don't bother even looking at those. And Alpine with not a great result. Gasly didn't even start the race. After the formation lap, he had a gearbox issue, from what the commentator said, which is kind of funny thinking that they changed so many components and they still had an issue with the car. And then Ocon finished P16, which sounds better than it actually is, because we had two DNFs, or sorry, a DNF and did not start. So that's actually just 2 places from last. But he did finished above Checo, so good for him, I guess. Mixed results for, honestly, McLaren. A 3-4 is a great result on paper, and I don't want to cling to the what ifs every weekend, but that's where we are, apparently, because we definitely could have had a 1-2 this weekend, or at least a double podium, and they royally fucked it with their strategy. But overall, very satisfied with where the season is heading, because we started the year with Max domination, and then we had splashes of hope, and now I feel like it's here. It's here. F1 is back. Racing is back. The season is great. And yeah, see you next time. Enjoy these memes. Bye.